Somebody ought to give God praise right now, because when God speaks, everything shifts. My brothers and sisters, as we step into 2026, I want you to lean in. Tighten that spiritual seatbelt, because God is not silent about your life, and He is certainly not silent about your money. Yes, I said it, your money. Because if God is not Lord over your wallet, then He's not Lord over your world. When you hold your money with a tight fist, you are declaring, without ever saying a word, that you trust your own ability more than God's. But God cannot pour into a hand that refuses to open the very blessing you are praying for can't be delivered, because there's no room for Him to place it. The hook is this: what you grip, you limit. What you surrender, God multiplies. When you surrender your resources to God, you are not losing control. You are simply handing control back to the one who never should have lost it in the first place. Surrender is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wisdom, because you are acknowledging that your source is bigger than your salary. Your supply is stronger than your savings, and your provider is greater than this world's economic systems. Many people are asking God to bless their finances while refusing to release their finances to God. They want increase, but they don't want submission. They want overflow, but they don't want obedience. But God's blessing always follows God's order. When you surrender what you have, God can position you for what He wants to give. This does not mean throwing away responsibility. It means aligning your priorities with heaven. The hook here is simple. If God can't rule your money, He can't release your miracle. Your wallet is often the loudest place where faith is tested, because money represents security, comfort, and control. Surrendering it becomes a spiritual act of trust, a declaration that you believe God knows how to manage what you place in His hands. Surrender also breaks the spirit of scarcity. When you hold everything tightly, you are telling yourself there is not enough, so you must cling to what you have. But God does not operate in scarcity. He operates in abundance. The loaves and fish multiplied only when they were placed in Jesus' hands. The flour and oil continued only when the widow obeyed God's instruction. The hook is this: your miracle begins where your fear ends. God is not trying to take something from you. He is trying to get something to you. But His blessings move along the tracks of obedience, and surrender lays those tracks in place. Financial surrender is not just about giving. It is about releasing control over your priorities, your decisions, and your trust. It means inviting God into your planning, your spending, and even your dreams. When you surrender your wallet to God, He begins to reorder your life, shifting your mindset from ownership to stewardship, from anxiety to peace, from limitation to opportunity. Surrender transforms money from a master into a ministry. The resources you release become seeds God can multiply, doors He can open, and opportunities he can orchestrate. And the more you release, the more room you create for God to move. The hook that holds it all together is this: when God becomes your financial foundation, he becomes your financial future. Surrender unlocks the blessing that was waiting for you all along. When the economy begins to shake, most people let their hearts shake with it. They let the numbers on the news determine the confidence in their spirit. But heaven's economy does not operate by the rise and fall of markets. It operates by the rise and fall of faith. That's why one of the greatest truths you can carry into your financial life is this: God's provision is not tied to the world's prediction. Earth may measure scarcity, but heaven measures surrender. Earth may operate in uncertainty, but heaven operates in sovereignty. When inflation increases or the job market tightens, God doesn't sit on the throne wringing his hands. He remains in full control. And because he is unshaken, you don't have to be shaken either. The economy you see on TV may fluctuate, but the God you serve is steady. He does not need stable markets to provide for you. He does not need government strength to sustain you. He does not need perfect conditions to keep you. In fact, God often does his greatest work in the worst environments. The hook is this: when the world breaks down, God breaks through. All throughout Scripture, God showed that his provision is not dependent on external circumstances. The Israelites received manna in a desert with no grocery stores. Elijah was fed by ravens in a land struck by famine. The widow's oil multiplied even when her cupboard was bare. Heaven's economy was functioning even when the earth's economy was collapsing. This is why you cannot let fear dictate your financial decisions. Fear will convince you that the world's instability means your future is unstable. Fear will tell you to shrink back, pull away, and stop trusting God with what you have. But fear is a thief. It steals your peace, your vision, and your trust. Faith, however, is the currency of heaven. Faith says, even when I can't see the way, I know God already made one. The hook is this: faith keeps you moving when fear keeps you stuck. And in 2025, you cannot afford to let fear become the voice that shapes your financial life. Heaven's economy also teaches you to look beyond what you see. The world trains you to trust in numbers, bank accounts, budgets, forecasts, salaries. God trains you to trust in his name, Jehovah Jireh, the Lord who provides. The world tells you the economy determines your outcome. God tells you that obedience determines your outcome. When you give, serve, steward, and manage your resources according to God's principles, you are tapping into an economy that cannot collapse. You are placing your trust in a provider who never runs out, never goes broke, never downsizes, and never delays without purpose. And when you align your finances with God's system, something supernatural happens. Peace replaces panic. Confidence replaces confusion. Hope replaces heaviness because you realize that your future is secure, not because the world is stable, but because God is faithful. The hook that drives this home is simple. The world may shake, but God's provision stands firm. When you live according to heaven's economy, you discover that your life is not defined by what happens around you, but by the God who stands above it all. God's blessings often hang in the balance of obedience. Too many people pray for financial breakthroughs while refusing to follow the instructions God has already given. They want increase, but they are unwilling to act on God's word. They want favor, but they are unwilling to honor his principles. The hook is this: blessings never arrive where obedience refuses to go. Obedience is the gate through which God's provision flows. Without it, prayers may sound sweet, sermons may inspire, but your finances remain stagnant. When God calls you to honor him with your giving, to manage your resources faithfully, or to step out in faith, it is not a suggestion. It is a pathway to supernatural alignment. God responds to obedience. And when you walk that path, doors begin to open that human effort alone could never unlock. Too often, we mistake desire for destiny. We think that just because we want a financial breakthrough, it should manifest without effort or alignment. But the Bible is clear. God's promises are activated through action in faith. Abraham did not simply hope for God's provision. He obeyed God's command to move, to give, to trust. The widow did not simply pray for oil. She poured out what little she had. The hook here is, God moves when we move, and he multiplies when we obey. Financial breakthrough is not a lottery. It is the reward of faithful action under divine instruction. Every instruction God gives is designed not to burden you, but to position you for increase, protection, and expansion. Obedience also transforms your perspective. When you follow God's leading in financial matters, your eyes are open to see opportunity where others see limitation. Your faith becomes practical, your prayers become strategic, and your actions align with divine timing. The hook is this: faith without action is a promise delayed. Obedience without faith is a miracle missed. In 2025, God is calling his people to step beyond mere belief and into practical application. Giving, saving, investing, and planning according to God's principles is not about restriction. It is about release. Release into the fullness of what he has prepared for you. When obedience governs your financial decisions, you also cultivate a reputation of integrity that attracts favor. God honors faithfulness, and people respond to reliability. Your finances are not only blessed by heaven, but are positioned for earthly alliances, opportunities, and openings that multiply your resources. The hook is simple but profound. Faithful feet attract favor, and obedient hands unlock heaven. Every time you honor God with the small things, he prepares to entrust you with greater things. Every act of obedience becomes a seed, that produces not just material increase, but spiritual maturity, wisdom, and discernment that ensures your financial breakthroughs are sustainable. Obedience in finances is more than just following rules. It is a lifestyle of trust. It is saying, God, I will follow you, even when I don't yet see the outcome, even when the risk feels high, even when others doubt. This posture activates God's power in ways that clever planning alone cannot accomplish. The hook that ties it all together is this: your breakthrough is waiting on your obedience. Because God always honors the hands that follow His word. When you step in faith, follow His direction, and honor His principles, your financial story begins to shift from limitation to abundance, from fear to confidence, and from ordinary to extraordinary. Stewardship is the cornerstone of every financial blessing. Yet so many overlook its power, thinking that wealth comes by chance, luck, or mere hard work. The truth is, God entrusts resources to those who demonstrate responsibility, discipline, and faithfulness. The hook is this: God does not reward waste, but He multiplies what is wisely managed. Every dollar, every asset, every opportunity is a test of stewardship. How you handle what you have now determines how much God can trust you with next. Mismanagement, impulsive decisions, and neglect block the flow of increase, while faithful management opens doors to exponential provision. When you view money as a tool for kingdom impact rather than just personal comfort, your perspective shifts. Stewardship is not simply about saving or budgeting. It is about honoring God with every resource and making intentional choices that align with His purposes. The hook here is powerful. Increase follows order, and favor follows faithfulness. God honors the hands that manage well. The Bible consistently illustrates this principle. The parable of the talents shows that the servants who invested and multiplied what they were given were rewarded, while the one who buried his talent out of fear missed the blessing. God's economy is strategic. He wants to see that you can handle what He entrusts before He entrusts more. Faithful stewardship also cultivates discipline, which is the framework for financial freedom. Discipline is the bridge between what you have and what you could have. The hook is this: discipline today determines abundance tomorrow. When you commit to wise spending, careful planning, and consistent giving, you create space for God to move. He cannot bless what you squander or neglect. But when you operate with intentionality, He positions you for opportunities, multiplies your resources, and protects your assets from unnecessary loss. Stewardship is the evidence of a heart submitted to God. And God never overlooks a surrendered heart. Moreover, stewardship demonstrates trust. When you manage your finances responsibly, you are declaring that you believe God can and will supply beyond what is immediately visible. You are telling Him, I am not afraid to do right with what you have given me because I trust you for what I need next. The hook is compelling. Trustworthy hands attract heavenly increase. This trust extends beyond money to influence, relationships, and time. When God sees that you can handle what is small, He prepares to entrust you with the large. Your faithfulness in everyday decisions builds a foundation for supernatural multiplication. Stewardship is also a conduit for blessing others. The resources you manage well are not just for your benefit. They become instruments for kingdom impact. Every act of responsible giving, wise investment, and intentional resource allocation carries the potential to transform lives, open doors, and establish legacies. The hook here is clear. When your hands honor God, your life becomes a blessing to many. Increase is never meant to be hoarded. It is meant to flow through faithful hands into the world. By stewarding well, you align yourself with God's rhythm, invite His favor, and position yourself for the abundance that follows diligent, disciplined, and obedient management. Fear is one of the most subtle thieves of financial destiny. It whispers in your ear that you cannot take risks, that the market is too unstable, that you will lose if you try. Fear convinces you to hold back what God has placed in your hands, to second-guess opportunities, and to doubt His provision. But faith operates differently. Faith is not blind, faith is bold. The hook is this: fear drains your future, but faith funds it. Every time you allow fear to dictate your decisions, you limit the flow of God's blessing and close the door to opportunity. Fear seeks to shrink your vision, while faith expands it. Fear wants you stuck. Faith moves you forward. Fear focuses on what could go wrong. Faith focuses on what God can do right. Fear also distorts perception. It magnifies obstacles and minimizes potential. When fear dominates, a small challenge can feel insurmountable. A temporary setback can feel like the end, and a simple decision can feel like a trap. The hook here is compelling. Fear tells you to retreat. Faith tells you to advance. In finances, fear can lead to indecision, missed investments, delayed giving, or refusal to step into God's promises. Faith, on the other hand, requires action. It says, even though I cannot see the entire path, I trust the one who has already made it for me. Faith is proactive. It moves in spite of uncertainty, while fear immobilizes and paralyzes. Faith also transforms challenges into opportunities. When you choose faith over fear, every economic downturn, every personal financial setback, and every uncertainty becomes a platform for God's supernatural intervention. The hook is simple but profound. Faith finds a way where fear only sees walls. History is filled with examples of ordinary people who experienced extraordinary breakthroughs because they refused to let fear dictate their financial decisions. Joseph thrived in Egypt despite being sold into slavery. David faced Goliath despite the odds stacked against him. Faith looks beyond the immediate threat and aligns with God's eternal plan. Fear, by contrast, sees only limitations and scarcity. Faith also breeds confidence and clarity. When fear dominates, decisions are clouded, priorities are distorted, and peace is elusive. But faith instills confidence that God is in control and that provision is available and that obstacles are temporary. The hook is this: confidence grows when fear retreats and faith advances. Your financial life begins to shift when you replace worry with trust. You begin to act decisively, to give generously, to invest strategically, and to pursue opportunities that align with God's will. Faith does not remove responsibility. It amplifies it with divine perspective. Fear contracts your vision. Faith enlarges it. Ultimately, choosing faith over fear is a declaration of trust in God's provision. It is saying, I believe your promises, even when circumstances scream otherwise. I will act in alignment with your word, even when the world advises caution. The hook that ties it all together is clear. Fear limits what you can see. Faith unlocks what God has prepared. By operating in faith, you open the door to financial breakthroughs, divine favor, and opportunities that fear would have kept hidden, ensuring that your resources, decisions, and future are guided by trust, not trepidation. Generosity is one of the most powerful yet overlooked principles of financial breakthrough. Too often, people think that giving diminishes what they have, that sharing resources creates loss rather than opportunity. But the truth is the exact opposite. When you bless God's kingdom through giving, you open the door for God to bless your house. The hook is this: when you sow into God's kingdom, you position yourself for provision that cannot be measured by human hands. Every act of generosity is a seed planted into the soil of heaven, and seeds always produce a harvest. What you release in faith does not vanish. It multiplies, grows, and returns with increase far beyond what you initially gave. Generosity also shifts your mindset from scarcity to abundance. When you give, you are making a statement of trust that God is your source and not your salary, your provision and not your possessions. The hook here is compelling. Your miracle begins where your giving leaves off. Giving is a declaration that you believe God can supply more than enough, that He can fill the gaps, and that He can bring increase even in situations that appear empty. When you give with a willing heart, your perspective changes. You stop obsessing over lack and start focusing on what God can do through what you release. Generosity transforms fear into faith, anxiety into assurance, and limitation into opportunity. Every act of generosity also aligns you with God's principles of multiplication. Jesus said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." And throughout Scripture, the faithful who give are always the ones who see supernatural return. The widow's oil multiplied when she obeyed God's instruction to give. Abraham's tithes unlocked God's favor and covenant promises. The hook is simple but powerful. Giving unlocks the blessings that hoarding cannot reach. God honors a cheerful giver, not a grudging one. When you give with a heart of faith, you invite heaven to intervene in ways that human effort alone cannot achieve. Giving is not merely a transaction. It is an act of trust, worship, and alignment with God's economy. Generosity also builds your legacy. The resources you release now can impact lives far beyond your immediate circle. The hook is this: what you release today becomes the blessing someone else receives tomorrow. Your giving plants seeds of transformation in the lives of others, creating opportunities, changing destinies, and establishing a testimony that outlives you. Increase follows generosity because it demonstrates a heart attuned to God's purposes. It signals that your priorities are kingdom, focused, and when your priorities align with heaven, your provision is guaranteed to follow. Generosity further cultivates gratitude and trust. When you bless others, you develop a spirit that recognizes God's hand in every provision. The hook here is a generous heart always has room for more. You begin to see that God is not limited by your bank account, that He can multiply resources in ways beyond human understanding. Generosity is the channel through which God pours favor, protection, and provision into your life. And it positions you to receive not just material increase, but wisdom, peace, and supernatural alignment with His plans. By giving freely, you create a cycle where heaven's supply flows into your hands in ways that defy natural explanation. So as you step into 2025, I want you to walk with your head high and your spirit anchored. Don't bow to fear. Don't retreat to old habits. Instead, declare, this year, my money serves God, not the other way around. Because when God becomes your financial foundation, He becomes your financial future. May this be the year you see Him open doors, break cycles, restore stewardship, and remind you that every good thing comes from the Lord. Stay faithful, stay focused, and watch what God will do